What if the strongest-looking emotional independence is actually the deepest form of attachment in disguise? Emotional independence is often admired. It looks calm, controlled, and unshaken. It wears the mask of strength. I don't need anyone. I'm fine alone. I don't get attached. But beneath this polished surface, something quieter and more complicated is happening. What appears as freedom from emotional need is often a carefully constructed defense against emotional exposure. The illusion begins early. Emotional independence forms not from confidence, but from adaptation. When connection feels unsafe, the mind learns to survive by minimizing need. Feelings are compressed. Desire is delayed. Vulnerability is labeled as weakness. Over time, detachment becomes a skill, and the person believes they've mastered self-sufficiency, when in reality, they've simply learned how to go numb without noticing. This illusion is powerful because it feels peaceful at first. There's no chaos, no emotional demands, no fear of loss. Distance creates a sense of control, but control is not the same as healing. Independence that requires emotional shutdown is not freedom, it's avoidance dressed as strength. The truth reveals itself in moments of unexpected discomfort, a text not replied to, a presence that suddenly disappears, a bond that quietly fades. That's when the cracks appear. The independent mind starts searching, replaying, rationalizing, not because it needs the person, but because the emotional system never learned how to attach safely. Suppression doesn't erase need, it only hides it. Real emotional independence doesn't fear closeness, it doesn't panic when connection deepens, and it doesn't collapse when distance appears. It's flexible, not rigid, calm, not guarded. The illusion, however, depends on distance to survive, and the moment distance no longer feels optional, emotional independence quietly reveals what it was protecting all along. For avoidant individuals, emotional closeness doesn't register as safety. It registers as risk, not because they don't want connection, but because closeness activates memories. The mind learned to survive by escaping, long before adulthood. Emotional proximity became associated with pressure, disappointment, or loss of control. The nervous system adapted by staying alert, distant, and self-contained. Avoidants often grow up learning that relying on others leads to unmet needs or emotional intrusion. Love may have felt conditional, inconsistent, or suffocating. As a result, independence wasn't a preference, it was protection. Emotional self-reliance became the safest option, teaching them that needing less meant hurting less. Over time, this survival strategy hardens into identity. When intimacy deepens, it quietly threatens that identity. Closeness asks for presence, openness, and emotional availability. Three things avoidants were never taught to experience without cost. Their body reacts before their logic does. Tightness in the chest, mental restlessness, an urge to withdraw. These aren't signs of disinterest, they're signs of internal alarm. Another reason avoidants fear closeness is the loss of emotional control. Intimacy creates dependency, and dependency feels like surrender. Being emotionally connected means someone else can affect your mood, your peace, your sense of self. For an avoidant, that influence feels dangerous. Distance restores power. Withdrawal restores balance. Silence becomes a way to breathe again. There's also a hidden fear rarely acknowledged. Closeness exposes emotional inexperience. Many avoidants never learned how to navigate deep emotional exchange. They don't know how to ask for reassurance, express vulnerability, or sit with emotional intensity. Intimacy feels like speaking a language they were never taught, so they retreat before being exposed. Ironically, the fear isn't about losing the other person, it's about losing themselves. Emotional closeness threatens the carefully built walls that keep old pain contained, and yet the same closeness they fear is what they crave in silence. Avoidants don't fear love, they fear what love awakens. The unprocessed emotions, the unmet needs, the vulnerability they learn to suppress. Until safety is redefined from distance to connection, emotional closeness will continue to feel like something to escape, even when it's the very thing their heart quietly hopes for. Avoidant individuals are often seen as independent, detached, or even unreachable. They appear calm, collected, and in control, like they have no emotional gaps that need filling. But beneath this composed exterior lies a hidden need, one they rarely, if ever, admit to be seen, understood, and emotionally held. This need is paradoxical. On the surface, avoidants act as if they don't rely on anyone, yet internally, Their emotional system longs for connection. The tension between wanting closeness and fearing it creates the push-pull behavior that frustrates partners and confuses friends. They may insist on space, retreat when intimacy increases, or act indifferent, but these are protective measures, not signs of absence of feeling. The hidden need stems from early experiences where dependency felt unsafe or unreliable. Emotional support may have been inconsistent, conditional, or overwhelming. To survive, avoidants learn to suppress their desires, downplay vulnerability, and convince themselves that needing others is weakness. Over time, this self-protection turns into habit, making their longing invisible, even to themselves. Ironically, the more avoidants hide their need, the stronger it grows. Every withdrawal, every wall they build, is secretly motivated by the hope that someone will notice, respect their boundaries, and still remain emotionally available. They crave reassurance without asking, care without showing, and emotional closeness without losing autonomy. Understanding this hidden need changes the way we perceive avoidance, not as cold or uncaring, but as individuals navigating a delicate balance between desire and fear. Their silence doesn't mean absence of need. It means a quiet, persistent hope that someone will meet them where they are, without forcing them to lower the walls they've built to survive. Push-pull dynamics are the invisible dance between desire and fear, connection and withdrawal, love and avoidance. This pattern is most common in relationships involving avoidant attachment. On the surface, it looks like unpredictability or inconsistency. But underneath, it's a carefully choreographed survival strategy. When an avoidant partner pushes, it isn't always about disinterest. Often, it's a subconscious reaction to emotional intensity. Closeness triggers old fears of vulnerability, dependency, or loss of control. By pulling away, they regain a sense of safety and emotional equilibrium. The push creates distance, space, and a temporary sense of freedom. But avoidance doesn't erase need. Deep down, they still crave connection, validation, and intimacy. The very things they just pushed away. This hidden desire is what triggers the pull. When the avoidant sees warmth, patience, or understanding from their partner, their suppressed attachment system nudges them back. They return, reconnect, and experience the comfort they secretly longed for. The cycle repeats because the underlying fear isn't resolved. Every advance can feel threatening. Every retreat feels protective. For the partner on the receiving end, this creates confusion. One moment they feel loved, the next moment distanced. This emotional oscillation keeps both parties emotionally invested, even when it's exhausting. Understanding push-pull dynamics is liberating. It reveals that avoidance isn't rejection. It's a fear-driven mechanism, trying to balance desire with self-protection. By recognizing the pattern, partners can respond with awareness instead of frustration, setting healthy boundaries while fostering trust. The push-pull isn't a punishment or manipulation. It's a window into the avoidant mind, a signal of unprocessed attachment needs, and a call for emotional patience. Once you decode this pattern, the confusion fades, leaving clarity, empathy, and the possibility of deeper, safer connection. Distance has a curious way of intensifying emotions, especially in relationships involving avoidant attachment. At first glance, it seems counterintuitive. If someone steps back, shouldn't we feel relief, space, or even indifference? The truth is far more complex. Human attachment systems are wired to notice absence. When connection is reduced, the mind perceives it as a potential loss, triggering a subtle yet powerful emotional alarm. For avoidance, distance is both a shield and a magnet. They create space to protect themselves from vulnerability. Yet the very act of retreat sparks hidden longing. Their emotional system has been conditioned to equate connection with risk, so when it's temporarily removed, it becomes a forbidden attraction. Their brain starts replaying memories, imagining scenarios, and calculating what could have been, often intensifying desire for the very person they sought to avoid. For the partner, distance also triggers a pull. The brain craves closure, attention, or reassurance. This interplay creates a feedback loop where absence fuels attention, and attention fuels desire. Emotional attachment strengthens because the mind tends to fill gaps with imagined intimacy, idealization, and anticipation. The scarcity effect, what is rare feels more valuable, works on both sides, keeping hearts entangled even when logic says otherwise. Distance doesn't just highlight absence, it exposes unacknowledged emotional needs. The longing isn't about control or manipulation, it's the heart's natural response to unpredictability and the subconscious hope for connection. Understanding this can change how we navigate relationships. Instead of reacting impulsively to distance, recognizing its psychological effect allows for patience, self-reflection, and healthier emotional boundaries. Distance, paradoxically, doesn't always push love away. It often makes it grow stronger, quietly reminding us how deeply we care. Silence in relationships is rarely neutral. For avoidant attachment, it's a double-edged sword, both a shield and a signal. On one hand, silence provides emotional safety. It allows avoidants to retreat, regain control, and protect themselves from vulnerability they aren't ready to face. On the other hand, silence has a magnetic quality, stirring curiosity, longing, and even anxiety in both parties. When words disappear, the mind starts to fill the void. Questions arise. Why aren't they responding? Do they care? Did I do something wrong? This mental replay triggers emotional intensity, often stronger than any conversation could provoke. The absence of communication forces reflection and imagination, creating a fertile ground for emotional attachment to grow quietly, almost imperceptibly. For the avoidant, silence isn't punishment, it's a coping mechanism. It's how they regulate their emotions without giving up control. They may fear that expressing thoughts or feelings will lead to rejection, conflict, or dependency. By withdrawing into silence, they maintain a sense of autonomy, even while their hidden attachment system quietly craves reassurance and connection. For the partner, silence can feel like rejection, confusion, or uncertainty. It often amplifies emotional responses, leading to overthinking, self-doubt, or intense longing. Paradoxically, the more someone tries to chase or understand the silence, the stronger the emotional attachment can become. Understanding the psychological impact of silence is transformative. It teaches patience, empathy, and awareness that silence is rarely about lack of care. It's about fear, self-protection, and unprocessed attachment needs. Recognizing this allows both partners to navigate space without panic, turning absence into an opportunity for growth, reflection, and emotional clarity. Silence doesn't always push people away. Sometimes it quietly deepens connection, revealing hidden desires, fears, and the subtle threads that bind hearts together. Avoidance and dependence may seem like opposites, but in emotional psychology, they're often two sides of the same coin. For avoidant individuals, independence is a defense mechanism, an armor against vulnerability, rejection, and emotional overwhelm. Yet beneath that armor lies a persistent, unacknowledged need for connection. Over time, the tension between wanting closeness and fearing it can quietly transform avoidance into emotional dependence. This shift often begins subtly. An avoidant person maintains distance, but when faced with prolonged separation, emotional emptiness, or loss, their suppressed attachment system awakens. The very person they pushed away becomes the center of their thoughts, the source of comfort they didn't know they needed. The protective walls that once kept them safe now make absence unbearable, triggering feelings of anxiety, longing, and reliance. The transformation from avoidance to dependence is not linear, it's full of contradictions. They may alternate between withdrawal and seeking reassurance, pride and vulnerability, coldness and deep longing. This internal push-pull reflects their struggle. Independence feels necessary for survival, but emotional reliance feels inevitable because the heart never stops craving connection. Understanding this process is crucial for both partners. It highlights that avoidance isn't lack of care, and dependence isn't weakness. It's the natural outcome of a complex emotional system. Learning to navigate safety, need, and intimacy. Awareness allows for compassionate communication, healthier boundaries, and emotional balance, preventing confusion, frustration, and unhealthy attachment patterns. When avoidance turns into dependence, it reveals a profound truth. Humans are wired for connection. No amount of detachment can erase the deep desire to be understood, valued, and emotionally supported. Recognizing this paradox is the first step toward empathy, healing, and truly secure relationships. Avoidant individuals often give the impression of being emotionally invincible. They don't cry openly, they don't linger on disappointments, and they rarely voice their pain. But beneath this composed exterior, they experience emotional loss just as intensely, sometimes even more so than those who openly express it. The difference is in expression, not feeling. For avoidance, showing vulnerability feels risky. Emotional loss is a quiet, private experience. They may grieve a relationship, a missed opportunity, or a perceived rejection in ways that are internalized rather than shared. Their coping mechanism is silence. They retreat, compartmentalize, and suppress the outward signs of hurt. This doesn't mean they are indifferent. It means their survival strategy prioritizes control over exposure. The result is a paradox. Partners or friends may assume the avoidant is unaffected, only to later realize the depth of the emotional impact through subtle behaviors, withdrawal, irritability, overthinking, or moments of unexpected nostalgia. The emotional loss exists like an invisible weight, shaping decisions, reactions, and attachment patterns without ever being explicitly acknowledged. This unexpressed loss also explains patterns of quiet longing or sudden reconnection. Avoidants may avoid confrontation or emotional displays, yet internally, they are processing grief, regret, or attachment needs. Over time, these suppressed feelings can influence behavior, sometimes creating tension in relationships, because the avoidant never learned to communicate emotional pain safely. Understanding this hidden grief is key to empathy. Emotional loss is not measured by tears or words. It is measured by the quiet spaces of the heart, where absence, longing, and unspoken attachment reside. Recognizing that avoidants feel deeply, even when silent, allows for greater compassion, patience, and insight into the complex dance of closeness and distance in their relationships. Awareness is the first step toward transformation. For avoidant individuals, recognizing the subtle push-pull of attachment, the hidden longing behind distance, and the unspoken grief they carry is crucial. Awareness doesn't mean judgment. It means seeing patterns clearly, understanding why they act the way they do, and acknowledging the impact of avoidance on themselves and others. Without this clarity, the cycle of retreat and silent dependence continues, quietly shaping relationships and emotional well-being. Healing begins when awareness meets intention. Once avoidants recognize their fears, triggers, and suppressed needs, they can start exploring healthier ways to connect without feeling threatened. Healing isn't about forcing emotional closeness or abandoning independence. It's about learning to balance vulnerability with autonomy. It's about understanding that needing someone doesn't make you weak, and that expressing emotions doesn't mean losing control. Through therapy, self-reflection, or supportive relationships, avoidants can gradually dismantle the walls built for protection and cultivate trust in both themselves and others. Emotional growth is the reward of this process. Growth allows avoidants to experience intimacy without panic, express feelings without fear, and navigate attachment with flexibility instead of rigidity. It transforms the internal push-pull into conscious choices, rather than unconscious reactions. Emotional growth doesn't erase past patterns. It rewires responses, allowing connection to feel safe, meaningful, and sustainable. Ultimately, awareness, healing, and emotional growth turn avoidance from a lifelong barrier into a bridge. They transform fear into insight, distance into clarity, and silence into understanding. The journey may be gradual and non-linear, but each step towards self-awareness strengthens emotional resilience, nurtures healthier relationships, and empowers the avoidant individual to finally experience closeness without losing themselves. Breaking the attachment cycle begins with recognition. Many avoidant individuals unknowingly repeat the same emotional loops: withdrawal, push-pull, silent longing, and sudden dependence. These patterns aren't random. They are learned survival strategies designed to protect the heart from perceived threats. Awareness alone, however, is not enough. To break the cycle, one must understand the triggers, acknowledge the fears, and commit to responding differently. The first step is emotional honesty. Avoidants often hide feelings behind composure, rationalization, or distance. Breaking the cycle requires naming emotions as they arise, even if it feels uncomfortable. This doesn't mean abandoning independence, but rather integrating vulnerability as a strength. It's about learning to say, "I feel this, and it's safe to feel it." Next comes conscious action. Instead of reacting to fear with withdrawal, avoidants can practice reaching out, expressing needs, and tolerating closeness without panic. Boundaries become tools for balance, not walls for isolation. Each intentional choice to engage, even imperfectly, weakens the automatic attachment loop and strengthens emotional resilience. Support is essential. Trusted partners, therapists, or mentors can act as mirrors, helping avoidants see when old patterns surface and encouraging alternative responses. Over time, repeated practice transforms habitual avoidance into adaptive connection, allowing intimacy without self-erasure. Finally, breaking the attachment cycle is about self-compassion. Avoidants often blame themselves for confusion, distance, or relational friction. Recognizing that these patterns were learned and can be unlearned releases guilt and fosters growth. Breaking the attachment cycle isn't a one-time event, it's a conscious, ongoing practice. But each moment of awareness, honest expression, and courageous engagement rewires the heart, allowing avoidance to finally experience relationships with clarity, balance, and genuine emotional freedom.